Hi, I'm Remick Ensweiler, Prairie/Outdoor Lab Manager here at College of DuPage, and I'm here to talk about the natural areas here on campus. We have about 40 acres of the 200 acres of campus that's defined as natural area. And what we're trying to do here is restore the environment back to its former habitat. What we're seeing right now is the 18-acre plot called the Russell Kirt Prairie. It's named after the founder of the natural areas, Russell Kirt. It was thanks to him and a few others in the 70s that we have this in the region. Ecological restoration is the process of restoring the native historical environment that Illinois used to have back to its former glory. Due to European settlement and other factors, there are invasive weeds that have come in and make it hard for us to have these native plants. I'm going to talk to you today about ecological restoration and the processes involved, such as prescribed fire, selective mowing, seed collection, and how we incorporate it here at College of DuPage. As we walk through, take account of how tall these grasses and these plants are. As you can see, I'm about 6 feet, and this grass comes up to me. This right here is called Indian grass, Sorghastrum nutans. It is one of the most common tall grasses on the prairie. Just like other grasses, it's warm season, which means it thrives in between spring and fall, as opposed to Kentucky bluegrass, turf grass, like in your backyard, that grows in the cool season of spring and fall. One important fact about a lot of these warm season native grasses is that they're clump forming, as opposed to the turf grass in your backyard, which is prostrate growing, where it just keeps creeping out and out. This is confined to a tuft, and there'll be another tuft and another tuft, and that's characteristic of Indian grass. Another grass that we have is called big bluestem, Andropogon gerardii. They call it big bluestem because of its bluish hue. I hope that comes through. And its bluish seed head here. Some of you might know it as the turkeyfoot grass. Like many other plants, there are different common names, which is why each has a Latin name. This is one of the most common tall grasses that we have, and you can see a lot of it here on the Russell Kirt Prairie. There were stories in journals past, when the settlers first started coming to the prairie, of parents actually losing their children in the tall grass. Now, as you can see, we don't have quite the tallest grass here, but historically, Illinois has these tall grasses over most of its landscape. The most common plant that you'll find here is called compass plant. This is it right here, and you can see it scattered across the landscape. There are a few interesting facts about compass plant. As you cut off a leaf, you can see how lacerated that it is. This is an adaptive characteristic to stay cool. Another one is, and you'll have to come out to touch this, but as you touch the leaf, you can feel that it's cool to the touch. And that's an adaptive characteristic from having this rough surface to stay cool in the hot Illinois summers. And as you read about each and every one of these plants, you'll read about these incredible adaptive characteristics that they have to survive in such a hot climate in the summer and cold climate in the winter. Also, the reason it's called compass plant is because it has a north-south orientation. Its leaves point north and south, generally in every environment that they're in. This helped American Indians and settlers find their way. There are other interesting plants along the prairie. Some of you might have heard of the plight of the monarch butterfly. Well, monarch butterflies and a lot of other insects really like milkweed plants to lay their eggs. I'll show you a milkweed right here. This right here is milkweed, common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca. They're very easy to grow, so we do encourage all the people who have room in their gardens or yards to plant this to help the monarch butterflies. It has an interesting characteristic of having this milky sap, which is why they call it milkweed. As you can see, that white material on my finger. Historically, this was used as for medicinal purposes by American Indians as well. Caterpillars find these leaves and they'll lay their eggs in this milky sap, and they're able to survive and thrive because of them. So a lot of people in the region are try to plant more of these because they do grow really easily and insects really appreciate them, especially the monarch butterfly. This is its seed head. So after it flowers, it forms this pod, and inside there are hairy seeds, which is why it reproduces so easily, because the seeds fly off in the air and go to other places as a dispersion mechanism. If you guys are interested at all, we do have plenty of seed that we do collect here, and I'm always welcome to give some to people who know they can plant them. There are a bunch of other interesting plants and grasses out here. This one right here is called the Prairie Dropseed grass, albus. It's a very nice grass here on the prairie. It's low statured and clump forming. It's great to form mats of fuel so that fire can go through very easily. So that in the spring and the fall, when we try to remove the material from the top and keep out woody invasion, this makes for great fuel. It actually smells like popcorn. So just like any plant, you use all your senses to try to figure them out as you start to identify them. Also, it has this interesting seed head, and the seeds are actually ready to collect. So currently, students and other volunteers are collecting the seed, and part of this will be propagated in the greenhouse so that we can have more grasses out here and also trade with other agencies. As you can see, it's in kind of a tuft. It might be hard to see for you, but it's in this thicket of grass right here, and it dots the areas. This is so that this helps the fire get through. When we do the fire in the fall and the spring, plants like these and other grasses help make sure that the fuel is connected to itself so that the fire is able to go through and not stop anywhere for lack of fuel. An interesting fact come fire season. Just now, so the prairie looks different every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, because different series of plants begin to flower. We're having a bunch of plants start to go to seed now, but as you can see, there are a lot of these yellow flowers dotting the landscape. This time of year is referred to as a sea of gold. These are called goldenrod plants. The genus is Solidago. Right here is stiff goldenrod, Solidago rigida. This is a bit higher quality. As you can see, it's just starting to flower with a nice yellow flower. Right here is called Canada goldenrod, or tall goldenrod, Solidago canadensis. This is just starting to go to flower as well, and tends to be weedy in nature. This is the time of season right now when it's just starting to bloom. As you can see, it has a very hardy yellow flower. And the prairie works in a way that flowers are always available throughout the growing season. So things flower early and then go to seed. Things flower in the middle of the season and go to seed. And right now, goldenrods are flowering and going to seed. And then there'll be one more period where the asters flower before the burn season and the dormant season in the fall. Come this week, the next, and the week after, it'll be just a whole sea of gold flowering plants. And this is an adaptive characteristic so that pollinators throughout the entire growing season have times to pollinate at the beginning of the season, in the middle of the season, and at the end of the season. If you were to come in 3-4 weeks, you'll see little white flowers dotting areas, and those are called asters, because that's when they will flower right before the season, the growing season ends and the dormant season begins. These are all mostly perennial plants, which means they grow every year as opposed to annuals and biennials. So as we burn them, the roots underneath can stay hardy so that the next year they grow back in a big way. We are now standing at the entrance at Lot College 4A. I wanted to show you guys what a pesky weed looks like. So for much of the early growing season, what we deal with is sweet clover. This right here is white sweet clover, but we also have yellow sweet clover. And that's Melilotus, alba, and officinalis for the Latin name. It's a biennial weed. So the first year it'll grow, and then it'll die back, and then the second year it'll produce flower and seed. As you can see, some of it's in its first year and some of it's in its second year. This is the flower right here. Each one of these flowers produces a lot of seed. What I'll do is I'll mow it one more time. It's September right now. I'll mow it one more time before the growing season ends, and I'll come through and I'll apply herbicide to it. If I don't do that, it'll survive and thrive. And a problem with this weed that's especially hard to deal with is that it really enjoys fire. A lot of the weeds that we deal with, they die back with fire as they're not adapted to fire. But sweet clover is adapted to fire. So the more fires we have, the more it likes it, which is why we have to spend a lot of time and effort pulling it and spraying it in order to get rid of it. So right here we have Bradford pear trees, and these are very nice trees planted along the sides of roads. They're planted all over the campus, and they flower for about 10 days in the spring with a nice white flower. But what's one person's beautiful tree is another person's weed. On our areas, it is a bit invasive, as you can see. Its seed finds a way to come into our areas and grow. When I came here a year ago in June of 2016, this whole area that we're standing here near the Lot 4A entrance was full of this Bradford pear tree. So what we did was have students come in, just like all the brush that we've cut all over the areas, and we cut the brush and we applied herbicide to the stumps. We also were able to burn this area, and what we found was interesting but not unexpected. In the growing season after the burn, we did find some resprouts that we're going to have to get this fall, but we also found a lot of this. This plant right here that's kind of dotting everything. For a lot of people, it's what makes them sneeze in late September and early fall, and that's called ragweed. This right here is called common ragweed. It's an annual weed, and it thrives off disturbance. So in succession, when we get rid of trees, oftentimes the year after, the soil is relatively traumatized. So it leaves a home for annual weeds that thrive off disturbance to come in. As we seed and burn this area, these annual weeds that are not as hardy will get outcompeted by the hardier, more conservative species that we put out here with seed. So in order to combat this, we'll just keep cutting this Bradford pear tree away to make sure the sun can get to the soil, and we'll make sure that we keep applying seed to the area and keep burning it, and eventually we'll have a more conservative, higher quality natural area. As we walk in a little west from the Lot 4A entrance, we stumble upon a different habitat. So this right here behind me is referred to as a Savanna Habitat. The native historical Illinois habitat had 3 shade gradients. It went from full sun prairie, which we've already seen a lot of, to fully shaded oak woodland, which we have on campus on the east side of campus at the corner of Park and Fowle. I do suggest you check it out sometime. Behind me is something in between, referred to as a savanna habitat, where there's half shade, half sun. It's dotted with Burr Oak trees, Quercus macrocarpa, that have been adapted to survive and thrive from fire. Russell Kirt planted these oak trees exactly 100 yards apart in order to try to simulate the prairie habitat. And in doing so, he's allowed certain plants to survive and thrive here that can only survive and thrive in a partially shaded environment. So when the sun rises in the east, one area is shaded by the oak, and then as it sets in the west, a different area is shaded by the oak, and certain plants have survived and adapted to live in that half shade regime. When Russell Kirt's daughter has come out here in years past to help out with the prairie, as she's still involved, she always mentions this area and what this looks like as more emulating how the Illinois landscape used to look like, with mostly grasses, with forbs, flowering plants dotted in between. And looking out, you see the Burr Oak trees where the fire is able to go through and it doesn't harm the trees at all. So we're in September 2017 right now. If you came in September 2016, you would have seen this dotted with, it would have been an understory of forest. It would have been an entirely forested area. of mostly sumac trees. In the winter, we came out and we cleared the trees to their stump level and applied herbicide to the stump in order to remove those trees, because those trees aren't desirable here. They're weeds. If we let them continue to come in and we don't burn and don't cut them away, they'll take over and prevent any of our desirable native plants from growing. So I just want to show you an example of what 1 year resprout growth looks like. So while we did try to apply herbicide to each and every stump, it's really hard to do it on that scale. Therefore, some of the trees are able to grow back in a big way. And this is the constant battle with weedy trees and invasive trees. This right here is sumac. Rus is the genus. And as you can see, it's trying to overtake it and grow it. So what I'll do and what students do is they'll come out here in the fall when the leaves are gone and the water isn't running through the stem, and they'll cut these for me. They'll take their pliers or whatever, and they'll cut it as low as they can, and then I'll come through and I'll apply herbicide to it just to make sure that these don't take over. But on the other side of that coin, as a sort of success story, is that while there's some woody regrowth right here, as you can see, we're getting a lot of growth of native flowering plants happening here. A lot of these are called false sunflower, and they're growing up in a big way. We applied a lot of seed to this area because as we get rid of weeds, we have to replace them with the desirable plants. So these are part of the things that we do here to restore the environment. As you can see, these flowers are teeming with bees right now, and that's because the bees find what's flowering at the time. Because these just started to flower and are budding and beginning to flower even more, the nectar is nice and fresh for them. We recently got 2 honeybee hives on campus from 2 different grants. Those are on the east side of campus at the corner of Park and Falwell, and I do suggest you guys check those out sometime. We hope to have honey soon. Right now we're in the woodland trail of the Russell Kirt Prairie. I do suggest you guys all walk through it to see all the different areas. What we have behind us is a wetland area, and when I first started in June of 2016, it was densely covered with a thicket of forested trees. So where I'm standing right now were a bunch of trees. Nobody could walk through it, no animal could walk through it, and that's a quintessential example of invasive trees invading an area and becoming really pesky weeds. So what we do, just like we did with the sumacs before, is we'll cut them down, apply herbicide, and continually mow them and apply herbicide until they're gone. I happened to mow this area within the past few weeks, so something like middle of August 2017, I mowed the areas. But an example of what we do with the brush after we cut it, when it's bigger brush, is we'll pile it up in these piles, and we'll try to burn as much of it as we can in the winter when the brush is dry, when there are no leaves on the brush, and when there's no water running through the xylem of the tree, of the plant. So these will be burned this winter in 2017 as part of our restoration efforts, because we have to get rid of the material, but then once we cut the material, we have to figure out a way to properly dispose of it. And the most efficient way to do that is to burn off the brush in brush pile burns. I want to move to another example of restoration techniques, and that's planting of native plugs. So we collect seed, and then we process the seed, and students do all that, and then we grow plants in the greenhouse, just like they do in the horticulture greenhouses. As part of our restoration efforts, we'll plant those plugs in areas where their habitats are. So we just had a class out last week at the end of August, and they were able to plant about 100 plant plugs in this area. So we hope that they'll outcompete that woody brush that we cut and intend to burn off. This right here is an example of a Leopold bench. This bench was constructed by students in landscape horticulture class taught by Brian Clement. It's a sturdy structure made up of cedar, very simple design. It was thought up by one of the godfathers of ecological restoration, Aldo Leopold, who came out of University of Wisconsin-Madison. He felt like it was a simple way to make a place to sit, contemplate, relax, and enjoy the natural areas. Hello again. We're into late October here on the prairie. The growing seasons go through phases, and we're entering or in the midst of the final stage of growth for native prairie plants. As you can see this time of year, there's turf grass that's growing really green right now. That's because it's a cool season grass, which means it grows before the summer and after the summer. Whereas the prairie is starting to turn brown and what we call senescing, or going to sleep for the fall and winter. We're going to expect the first freeze soon, after which we're going to set fire to the prairie should the weather conditions be right. There are still activities that can be done on the prairie at this time of year, and I'll tell you a little about those today. This plant right here is called Prairie Cordgrass. It's a native Illinois grass that prefers open sun and likes it wet. What I'm going to show you today is an activity that we conduct this time of year. Once we know that the seed, which is this right here, is ripe, we take buckets like I have here, strewn them across our shoulder for convenience, and we harvest them. It's really simple to harvest. You use whatever's comfortable for you, whatever tool is comfortable. A hand will work just fine. We break off the seed head, put it in our buckets, and keep on until we have collected the desirable amount of seed. Depending on the year, we'll take between 50 to 75% of the seed. That's because we like to leave some for the natural area to have, but we also want to take enough so that we can grow it in the greenhouse, propagate it there and plant it back out in natural areas, or throw it out in other areas that don't have this plant in order to increase diversity. The plant that I'm about to show you is one that I'm sure that you've all recognized. It's called cattail, and it's in most places that you've probably grown up around here. It's a fairly weedy plant that, if neglected, can take over an area. And while it does perform ecological services such as removing macronutrients from the soil and being a bioremediator, it does choke out other native plants and decreases diversity. So there are some areas that will manage this in different ways. Some people will go around and collect the heads. These are the seed heads right here, before they go to seed, which are these fluffy seeds right here, in order to remove the seed from the area. And then they'll just continually cut it to give it a competitive disadvantage. That's one option. Another option is for agencies to spray the area with herbicide in order to kill it, seed it with better plants, and hope for the best results. There's an innovative idea that we're looking into here at COD, and that's to bring in goats and sheep to actually graze the areas. Historically, Illinois prairies had been grazed by bison and other macrofauna, and it's an interesting idea that's just starting to get its legs. As for now, we do a combination of things. We mow some areas, we spray some areas, and we remove the seed heads from other areas. We're working on the best, we're kind of using trial and error right now to find the best method for controlling this. This tree right here is public enemy number one when it comes to natural areas. This is called common buckthorn. Its Latin name is Rhamnus cathartica. It's a particularly invasive tree that has come over to this area in a big way. It was used in Europe as a hedgerow, and it's very good at that. As you can see, it's very bushy, which makes privacy really easy. Also, it has these thorns on it, hence the name buckthorn, that keep out certain things. And it also reproduces very quickly because it grows these berries right here. And birds find them very palatable, and they'll eat them and spread them very quickly. And so there's a big problem with buckthorn in the area, and we're doing everything we can to get rid of as much as we can as possible. It's a long, arduous process, as there is a lot of it, but we're working hard at it. We're walking through the wooded path here in the Russell Kirt Prairie. And as you can see, there's grown-up buckthorn, honeysuckle, dogwood, and other invasive trees on all sides of me. When left neglected, this is what happens to an understory of a forested or shaded area. With this, animals are not able to get through, and native plants, desirable plants, aren't able to grow. So what we do about it is we come in the fall and winter when these plants are starting to senesce and go dormant after the growing season, and we remove them, apply herbicide, and burn the excess material off. What I'm about to walk into is where we've already cut a lot of the brush. As you can see, it's quite more open here than over here. And this was just one winter's work, and as you can see, we still have piled up brush that we need to burn away, which we'll be doing this winter, and continue to do each winter until these areas have fully been cleared out and native seed and plants can express themselves. Now we're at the corner of College and Lambert Road at the southwest corner of the Russell Kirt Prairie. What I'm about to show you guys is what was intended by Russell Kirt and the founders of the prairie to be a seed bed. As you can see right now, it's been taken over by this tall brown grass, which is Indian grass and big bluestem. What we do is we come through and we make this as pretty as possible by getting rid of the seed of this plant and getting rid of the plant itself, either by cutting or herbicide, and we plant better, more diverse, more showy plants on the outside, as the vision of these founders was to have a horticultural bed that people could see from the edge and get behind. If you ever have a chance, I advise you to take a walk. As you can see, it's very nice to have vegetation on both sides. Behind me is a hidden gem in the middle of the Russell Kirt Prairie. This is a water body right here. Usually there are two resident egrets during the growing season, which are these regal white birds. Also, there are plenty of mallards and mallards or ducks around as well. And it's just a great place for rainwater from all over campus to come to and rest and go into the water table instead of jamming up our sewer systems and our turf grass. This is a wonderful resource for the college and the community to have a place for its rainwater and runoff to go. And it's also a wonderful place to rest, relax, and just hang out. On the prairie, there are different habitats based on how much rain an area gets, how much water an area holds, and a lot has to do with whether it's elevated or down low. Russell Kirt, the founder of the prairie, made sure to have all these habitats here. And by doing that, he set out with a tractor and moved dirt around to make this happen. And luckily for us, we now have a bunch of different habitats. As you can see, we have swale habitat, which is really low and wet, and there's a whole matrix of plants that prefers that. And then we go up to the hill prairie up top, where it's dry and the water drains out low, and there's a whole set of plants that prefer that habitat. And thanks to him, we have both different kinds of plants here on the Russell Kirt Prairie. I want to thank you for taking this virtual tour with me. If anytime you want to come out and get valuable experience doing this sort of work, there are always volunteer opportunities year-round. You can find the information on social media under COD Natural Areas. There's a Facebook and Instagram with information about the events, and also online if you go to the College of DuPage website and follow the links to the natural areas. Also, I'm on campus 40 hours a week. I'm a staff in the biology department. My name is Remick Ensweiler. Feel free to look me up and find out my information. It's been a pleasure to talk with you all. Have a wonderful semester.